What is happening? I want to share something that has inspired me tremendously lately. And it comes from one of my favorite books, The Story of Philosophy by Will Durant. And this book is awesome. I've been into philosophy since I graduated from college. And man, it's just amazing. My education truly began once I graduated and started studying things that really excited me just for the fun of it. I didn't in university, in high school, I didn't study like anything that ever really interested me. And I didn't study philosophy in college. I didn't study creative writing, um history. I've always been interested in history, but I didn't get like too into it. So I kind of thought, I'm like, what do I like? I studied journalism, but in university, I got into it thinking that I was going to do broadcast journalism, but realized I didn't want to do that. And then started going down a writing track and just realized that I hated news reporting and I did not like newsworthy stories and just the newsroom vibe of like it's got to be stuff on the daily coming out. It's got to be hot and heavy and quick. And like, there's not much creativity in it. I had no idea that I wanted to be a writer during college as a caveat at that time as well. It all started after I graduated, but it's and I'll get to how everything is just really how I'm seeing my life um as like just these stepping stones where everything makes sense looking back. In retrospect, it all makes sense. The stars align. But as we're going through it, it's like, what does this mean? Why is this happening? It just doesn't make sense. Like dealing with back pain for 6 years. I've been so lost and confused in it. And it's all making sense now. Why it happened, how it happened. It's absolutely wild. So I graduated university and I started just devouring information I got into philosophy, just learning about Greek philosophy, Roman philosophy, like Stoicism and um, kind of modern Enlightenment stuff. Uh, there's everything. A lot of Stoicism. Just like learning about philosophy and like what it is, like, and just how it could be applied to life. And I think Stoicism was the most important one in that aspect, and also the Tao Te Ching, which is just about like flowing with life, doing less, and allowing life to kind of present itself to you by you move along this path. You don't fight against it, and the truth will really reveal itself. That's kind of Taoism, and it's basically all of this to say. Well, also I got like in really into history when I graduated. It's like philosophy, history, creative writing because I was starting to discover that is what I love, and traveling and creative writing became kind of my thing. And I got this book like last year, I think, and it just like walks through the story of philosophy. So like from from the Greeks, Socrates, Plato. It just walks up to the present day, and I love Will Durant's style. It's like it's middle 20th century, but it's got that kind of old school intellectual cadence, but it's also very readable and super interesting. It's like this reads as like a story, hence the title. And I just love learning when you don't have to study for a fucking test anymore. Like that is why I became obsessed with just knowledge and information and understanding when I graduated because I didn't feel this pressure anymore. Like, oh, I have to just learn these dates just to pass a test. It's like, no, I actually want to know how this stuff applies to my life. And it's giving me excitement and learning about these cultures and these people, these philosophers, these different ways of thinking. Um, that is just so cool how that I want to like go to that place and like learn about Greek philosophy and like go to Greece, or I want to go into Japan as I learn about Japanese philosophy and stuff. And it just, my enthusiasm and excitement for the world and for the ways in which we think and for different cultures was just starting to just smolder. And now it's a raging fire that I can't control. And that's a big part of what I want to talk about today. So I just started just reading this again for the second time, just going through it. Um, and I'm in the beginning, just Plato. Um, so Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, kind of the big three Greek philosophers. There were many before them, but kind of modern philosophy started with Socrates. Modern, it was still 2,400 years ago, which is crazy. This was before Jesus, which is like, 2,000 years ago, Jesus came to the earth and like changed everything. But 400 years before that, this guy Socrates was running around Athens, and he was this. The philosophers of the ancient Greek times they weren't just like wise old men, they were like warriors too. Like Socrates was a valiant warrior. He served in, I think, the Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta. They were just fighting for like 40 years on and off. And he was just known for his courage in battle, Socrates. And this book, hold on, bear with me. The Last of the Wine by Mary Renault. One of my favorite fiction books. And, we hear about like Socrates, Plato. They don't, you can't imagine what life was truly like at that time. Like, who's Socrates? It's like he has one name, like Plato. Plato was his nickname, because he was a wrestler, and it meant just broad shoulder, Plato. So that was his nickname. And this book, The Last of the Wine, it tells a fictional story. The main character is this Athenian, this it kind of just moves through his life, and it's during the time of the Peloponnesian War, of Sparta and Athens fighting, and he becomes like a pupil of Socrates, the main character in this book. And it was the first time I saw like these ancient characters that are just so, these names like Jesus, Socrates, Plato, Julius Caesar, like these names, you can't imagine them as real people. 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, 2,400. But this book, it makes it like I've never just imagined it so like real life, where Socrates was just this guy who would roam around Athens, just like challenging people. In thought, he would just question them, and that is where the Socratic dialogue, Socratic method of speech comes from, where he would just keep asking you more and more questions to make you clarify what you were saying until you were like, I don't fucking know. He'd be like, what is, like, he would say like, there's two soldiers talking about justice. Socrates would walk up and say like, yeah, but what is justice? You throw around this term so offhandedly, like, what is justice? And he would just keep asking questions, and until they were stumped. And they're like, okay, Socrates, you got us. So everybody kind of hated him, but he had like the youth of Athens. Um, he was like their god or their father. He didn't really have a job. His wife kind of hated him, but they were like, Socrates kind of used her. I think it was Xanthippe with an X. Kind of used her as like a philosophical foil, So he he said she was like a great competitor philosophically. And so for like the older people in Athens who kind of espoused the old gods and on Mount Olympus and just the old way of thinking, Socrates was kind of tearing that down by kind of saying like this stuff is all kind of BS. Um, and in this book, The Last of the Wine, it's fucking awesome. The main character he's kind of a student of Socrates. So the youth of that generation just loved Socrates. He was doing things differently. He was kind of the rebel, but he was like this older wise man now, and just roamed around challenging people. And um, so the main character is like one of his students, and then Plato is also another one of his students who's like 42 years younger than Socrates. Socrates didn't write anything down. He was just all dialogue, and Plato wrote everything about Socrates in his books. And like we know that, and what's so cool about Socrates is that he didn't say, this is the way you do things. He would just ask questions incessantly. And when a couple of his buddies went to the Oracle of Delphi, and it says what I was talking about earlier, like, I want to go to this place and like see history, see where it happened. And it's not just to learn these things because it's cool and interesting, but like it's real. This stuff happened 20, thousands, millennium ago. It's just life. And a couple of Socrates' buddies go to the oracle and say, who's the wisest? Is there anybody wiser than Socrates? And she said, no, there is nobody wiser than Socrates. And they went back to him and said, like, what do you think about this? And they expected him to be like, of course. Or he's just like, well, I'm the wisest because all I know is that I do not know. Like, all I know is I don't know anything, and I'm just going to keep asking questions. So that was the kind of person he was. And then he eventually was put to death because he was charged with corrupting the youth. He was getting them all to denounce the typical gods, and getting, they were challenging the democracy and everything, which was really not much of a democracy. It was incredibly slave ridden and fascinating time. But Plato was a pupil of Socrates as well as the main character in this book. I highly recommend. If you're any interest in like Greek philosophy, this is like a fictional story, during that time. So you feel like it's like a real, it's like, you read a story about World War II, like historical fiction, and you're like, yeah, this is believable. I could see myself. What is Paris like in the 1940s as it's like occupied by the Nazis and stuff? It's like, that's real. But it's like ancient Greece with Socrates walking around. This book makes it real. And it's freaking sweet. Not about time. The Olympic Games are going on. It's pretty cool. Of course, there's endless war, but so Plato is a young man. Socrates is put to death. He is told to drink the hemlock, the poison. Goes out like a champ. His friends are there. I think Crito and Plato. Plato writes about him taking the hemlock, the poison, and he just went out in like the most badass, poetic way. Like his last words, Crito, was they were like crying, Plato and his buddy, and he's just like, guys, come on. I'm trying to go out like a champ here. Like I sent the woman away so they wouldn't be, brought to tears, but you guys are crying. And the last thing he says, oh, here we go. Um, hold on one sec. Okay, this is good. Um, so he starts to drink the poison, Socrates. He was beginning to grow cold about the groin. So this is from the book. When he uncovered his face, where he had covered himself up, and said, they were his last words, Credo, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt? The debt shall be paid, said Credo. Is there anything else? There was no answer to this question. In a minute or two, a movement was heard, and the attendant uncovered him. His eyes were set, and Credo closed his eyes and mouth. His last words, Credo, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Socrates, the greatest philosopher of all time. So Plato, he's 28 when Socrates dies. It's 399 BC. So, 400 years before Jesus. And he's 28 years old at the time. I'm 28 right now. How's it going? Gonna be 29 in a month. And this is why I bring all of this up. This is why I'm so fired up. When Plato was 28, I'll just read this. His efforts to save Socrates had marked him out for suspicion by the democratic leaders. His friends urged Athens was unsafe for him, that it was an admirably propitious moment for him to see the world. And so, in that year 399 BC, he set out. Where he went, we cannot for certain say. There was a merry war of the authorities for every turn of his route. He seems to have gone first to Egypt, and was somewhat shocked to hear from the priestly class which ruled that land that Greece was an infant state, without stabilizing traditions or profound culture, not yet therefore to be taken seriously by these sphinxly pundits of the Nile. And then off he sailed to Sicily and to Italy. There he joined for a time the school or sect which the great Pythagoras had founded. And once again, his susceptible mind was marked with the memory of a small group of men set aside for scholarship and rule, living a plain life despite the possession of power. 12 years he wandered, imbibing wisdom from every source, sitting at every shrine, tasting every creed. Some would have it that he went to Judea and was molded for a while by the tradition of the almost socialistic prophets, and even that he found his way to the banks of the Ganges, and learned the mystic meditations of the Hindus. We do not know. He returned to Athens in 387 BC, a man of 40 now, ripened to maturity by the variety of many peoples and the wisdom of many lands. He had lost a little of the hot enthusiasms of youth, but he had gained a perspective of thought in which every extreme was seen as a half-truth, and the many aspects of every problem blended into a distributive justice to every facet of the truth. He had knowledge, and he had art. For once, the philosopher and the poet lived in one soul, and he created for himself a medium of expression in which both beauty and truth might find room and play. The dialogue. Yes. And I just realized, I'm like, wow, that is like what I want in life. I'm 28. Plato was 28 when he set out for 12 years. And you don't have to know why you want to go. You don't have to know why you want to do what you want to do in your life. But you have to do it. You have to fucking do it. If you're called to something, you can either answer the call or go your whole life wondering and pushing this thing down. And perhaps getting bodily symptoms like me because you weren't living in your truth. And bring all this up because I'm just realizing, like with each passing day, that everything I've done, from studying journalism to learn how to write, to discovering my love for travel and history and philosophy and literature and art when I graduated, to working jobs I didn't like, which caused pain in my body. I had 6 years of back pain, which I've just in the last 3 months come to realize has been emotional, and that the energy in my body has been disharmonious, and that is what I'm healing right now. And I feel like the world is in a way waking up to I feel like this pain that I've dealt with for my adult life since I graduated college and started making my way in the world, it has been it has shown me the truth in many ways. It has broken me down, and because of it, I've had to dig into myself to find joy and light, because it's been very dark a lot of the times. And I've had to find these things that I love and go after them because, for one, as like a distraction, but because in seeking an answer to why I felt pain, I went to these things, the philosophy and stoicism and learning history and how people have dealt with shit before, Anne Frank and Viktor Frankl and concentration camp, and how they dealt with life and how they saw the spirit. And it caused me to dig deep within myself. Because of it, I've embarked on this journey of understanding and peeling back the layers of my own truth. And we're still in the beginning of this journey. It's absolutely insane, but everything has led to the next. And I feel like it's happening at a time when the world is kind of stepping into this new consciousness. And there's so much good, and there's many people out there who feel the same way I do. But we're so inundated by the noise and the negativity of the change. Like, it's happening because the world is going through this seismic shift in consciousness, and it's creating a lot of change. And there's pushback against it. You know, people don't want to see the way the things have been done crumble. And I've battled with this since graduating college. Like, I know I don't want to live an ordinary, orthodox life of finding a job you don't like and just doing it to make money. And that's been my greatest battle besides back pain. But now I know they're one and the same. It's all coming from this inner conflict. And I had to go through this stuff, go through this, the time in the darkness and the valley, to understand myself and to reach a point where I'm like, I know I'm not going to. Well, just in the last couple of months, I've realized that I'm feeling pain because of not living my truth and of doing anything that veers me away from it. And I mean, I'm in Japan, living in Tokyo. That was definitely a step in my truth, and I'm here for a reason. I believe it. And the way of, more and more could take a long time, but we're gonna realize that the only way to survive, the only way to survive as a species is to evolve. And the 9 to 5 job of hating your life and that stuff, like, it's gonna fade. And what will remain is finding what lights our soul on fire. But we can't just hold out for that day. We got to dig deep now. And that understanding will often come from suffering, from realizing what we hate about life, about ourselves, and changing until we make contact with our truth and peel back the layers, and we finally reach ourselves. And I felt conflicted with my love of traveling and my longing to see the world and live this story like Plato, traveling for 12 years at 28 to come back. And one of my favorite people, Kevin Kelly, did the same thing. He traveled all throughout Asia and China in his 20s, not really knowing what he was doing, but he says, do something in your 20s that looks nothing like success, because that very act will one day be the cornerstone of your success. At the time, we don't know why we're doing it. I don't really know why. I moved to Japan, but I'm going to live here for 3 years at least. And that's without a doubt going to be a pillar of my life and what I do in the future. Just having the perspective of living here and living in the East as a foreigner. And I used to be like, is it that, can I really do this? Why do I want to live in foreign countries? Shouldn't I be settling down somewhere? And I felt almost ashamed or like I was falling behind, even though I've known this has been my calling since I graduated. All I want to do is travel and write. And reading just that passage that I read of Plato just fires me up so much. And that is a fucking sign. That's what I'm meant to do. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what I'm going to do after Japan, and still trying to figure out what I'm doing here. But I know this is my path, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. And as I heal my body, I heal my soul and my heart. It's all connected. And that healing comes from aligning ourselves more and more with our truth and with our true callings and what we want to do with our lives. And like I said, it might take suffering to understand that and realize it. What do you hate? What don't you want to do? What job are you working that you truly do not like at all? And do the opposite. If you can, make a change. Suffering and hitting rock bottom must be the impetus to make change in our lives. And it's all happened for this reason, like this wild reason of just gearing me closer and closer. And I think in a way the world is waking up, and I feel like me going through this now is making me part of the vanguard of light, who could hopefully show people that we have to do this. It's our duty to live and embody our deepest joys and what gives us life, and to change the fucking world by changing ourselves. Truly. We're not supposed to suffer and do jobs that we hate. We're supposed to give it everything to live a life of integrity and purpose and meaning. And what is meaning? That is hard to explain. All you know is how it feels. Something is meaningful. It has depth. It matters to you. You feel it. Doing this now is meaningful to me. I don't know what it means. Making these YouTube videos, it's like I'm not doing it for any other reason, but it brings me joy to talk about this. And I know I'll look back one day and be glad I did, because in this moment right now, I'm finding meaning and joy in it, and enthusiasm and love for life. And that's what greater purpose is there than that? So look for those clues, like the passages in the books, and try to connect them with the rest of your story. Because we're all living our own story. And we can really be the hero of that story. Heroes got to take chances. They got to take chances on themselves and kind of put the blinders up to what the world says and thinks, to do what's right for them. And it's beyond comprehension. Everything really is happening for a reason. It's hard to see when we're in it, but looking back, it all makes sense. It's all for a reason. Freud said in retrospect, the years of struggle strike us as the most beautiful. Right now, right here, as I'm going through this healing journey, this process, every day is so damn meaningful. I'm battling my own mind. I'm doing what I love without a guarantee of things working out, success. I'm just doing it because I'm committed to myself. One day I know it'll all pay off, and it already is, because the process itself is what gives me life. You keep doing that long enough, you will find your way. Okay. Two great books here. Much love, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. That was a fun one. See you next time.